President Trump has not necessarily shown an interest in Africa. People I speak to say it's a place he doesn't quite understand. It's not the top of the agenda for this president. So no surprise that it wouldn't get a mention in his speech. And perhaps maybe if you're an African president, you didn't want to be in that speech in the first place. But the reality is here is you're looking at a president who's been hands off this continent, very different to his predecessor, Barack Obama, who in his last State of the Union address told Americans that not only did America have a duty and a responsibility to help the African continent, but that it would also protect its own interests in that way. What we've seen with President Donald Trump is, for example, reduced aid to the continent and just more and more distance. Envoys on the continent feel there's not necessarily a director from Washington. So things are sort of like up in the air. But the point is, this isn't a president who's put Africa at the top of his list of priorities, in a sense.
And actually, what's worse, the U.S. just expanded the travel ban, the notorious travel ban. Nigeria, Africa's most populous, I should say, and strongest economy, added to the list of countries now facing restrictions to the U.S. Have they been blindsided by this ban?
Leila, it's safe to say the Nigerians didn't see this one coming. In fact, and if you look at the responses to that, a lot of Nigerians furious about this. They look at the contribution that they make, for example, in the United States, hardworking Nigerians living in the United States, and how they could be impacted in terms of being reunited with their families. But there is the sense that this has more to do with the Trump administration looking to pressure the Nigerians into cooperating more with outside players in terms of dealing with the terrorist insurgency in the north of the country. But nonetheless, this came as a huge surprise. The response by the Nigerians was very diplomatic. Of course, you don't want to come out there handling this thing in the wrong way. So a very sort of muted, we will cooperate with the United States. And so we expect that perhaps in the near future, that's something that could be undone. But overall, this latest ban, remember the first one was dubbed the Muslim ban. This latest one has been called the Africa ban, of the 6 countries that have been added to the list for our African, Leila. So that's about a fifth of the African continent affected by that.
Yeah, that is a very stark number. Now, how is the U.S. president viewed on the continent?
Well, I mean, look, here's the thing. So this is the president who, of course, made that derogatory reference, was accused of that, at least he denies it. But I think Africans have the understanding that they don't have somebody rooting for them in the White House, although they know that the US is still an important place. So no African president would pass up a visit or an invite to Washington, so to say. In fact, we've seen a few of them go to Washington because the understanding is that the US is still a very important partner and an ally for African countries. And, you know, just as recently as 2018, we were still saying that it was American companies that were leading the world's companies in terms of foreign direct investments on the continent. But interestingly now, we see how that's changing. And of course, the US not necessarily troubled by that. We've heard from Washington's top diplomat to Africa as recently as August, basically alluding to the fact that Washington isn't obsessed with the fact that it's losing the race to China on the continent. But of course, on the continent, there are people worried about that who prefer the US as an ally as opposed to new influences like the Chinese and the Russians and other players coming in.